history pros. Ever get annoyed by a flood of spam emails or have a dozen different delivery drivers show up at once? It's a modern menace. But what if all that digital chaos happened in real life, all at one house, all on one day? Welcome to 54 Berners Street, London on November 27, 1810, the site of one of the most audacious pranks ever pulled. The mastermind was Theodore Hook, a notorious wit, composer, and troublemaker. While walking with a friend, Hook made a bet for a guinea that he could make any house in London the most famous address in a week. His unsuspecting target? A Mrs. Tottenham of 54 Berners Street, London. For the next few weeks, Hook and his friend sent out thousands of letters, meticulously mimicking the style of Mrs. Tottenham, requesting all manner of goods and services to be delivered to her home on a single day. The day began with a dozen chimney sweeps arriving to clean chimneys that weren't dirty. They were followed by wagons delivering tons of coal, dozens of pianos, and a mountain of wedding cakes. Then came the professionals. Doctors, lawyers, dentists, and priests summoned to attend to a dying resident who was in perfect health. But Hook didn't stop there. He sent for the big guns. The governor of the Bank of England, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the chairman of the East India Company, and even the Lord Mayor of London himself were all tricked into visiting the beleaguered house.
By midday, Berners Street and the surrounding neighborhood were in a state of absolute gridlock. Carriages were jammed wheel to wheel. Merchants were brawling in the street over who had been summoned first. And a massive, confused crowd had gathered to watch the pandemonium. Hook, meanwhile, had rented a room in the house directly opposite, where he and his friend watched the chaos unfold with glee. Despite the massive disruption and the fury of the duped tradesmen and dignitaries, Hook was never formally caught or punished for the stunt. He won his bet! And the story became legendary. Lesson: the Berners Street hoax of 1810 was more than just a prank. It was a physical world denial of service attack. It brilliantly exploited a system built entirely on the assumption of good faith. Hook's letters were the 19th century equivalent of malicious code, proving that any system, social or digital, can be paralyzed by weaponizing its own trusted protocols.
Hello, history pros. What's the best reason to start a war? Land? Resources? Ideology? How about a dog? A naughty dog who just wouldn't listen. Welcome to the Greek-Bulgarian border, October 1925, the scene of the hilariously named, but deadly serious, the War of the Stray Dog. The story begins on October 18th, when a Greek soldier's dog decided to bolt across the border into Bulgaria. The soldier, doing what any dog owner would do, gave chase. But this simple act had fatal consequences. A Bulgarian border guard, seeing a Greek soldier running into his country, shot and killed him. This seemingly small tragedy was the spark that lit a very short fuse. The relationship between Greece and Bulgaria was already incredibly tense, poisoned by years of rivalry over territory in Macedonia and Thrace following World War I. The Greek government, at that time a dictatorship led by the impulsive General Theodoros Pangalos, saw the incident not as a tragic misunderstanding, but as a hostile act of Bulgarian aggression. Pangalos issued a harsh 48-hour ultimatum to Bulgaria: punish the guilty, make a formal apology, and pay 2 million French francs in compensation. When Bulgaria hesitated, proposing a joint investigation instead, Greece took matters into their own hands. On October 22nd, Greek forces invaded Bulgaria, occupying several villages with the clear objective of taking the strategic town of Petrich to enforce their demands.
The outmatched Bulgarian army, limited by post-war treaties, mounted a defense, but appealed urgently to the League of Nations in Geneva, Switzerland to intervene. This was a critical test for the young international body. Acting with surprising speed, the League of Nations condemned the Greek invasion. They called for an immediate ceasefire and the withdrawal of Greek troops from Bulgarian soil. Faced with international pressure and the threat of sanctions, Greece complied. The League ultimately ordered Greece to pay £45,000 in reparations to Bulgaria for the invasion. the war was over. In total, around 171 people had been killed, all because a dog decided to go for a run. Lesson: the War of the Stray Dog in 1925 is a textbook example of a pretext. It demonstrates that when nations are primed for conflict by underlying hostility and aggressive leadership, any event, no matter how absurd, can be twisted into a justification for war. It also stands as a rare early success for international diplomacy, showing that a united global community can, at times, step in to stop the fighting, even if it can't always stop the barking.
Hello, History Pros! What do you do when you're the greatest army on Earth, but you sail like a drunken toddler? If you're the Roman Republic in the 3rd century BC, you don't learn to sail better, you invent a way to fight a land war on the ocean. Welcome to the First Punic War, a titanic struggle between Rome and the naval superpower of Carthage. Around 260 BC, the Romans were getting absolutely thrashed at sea. The Carthaginian navy, with centuries of experience, would literally dance circles around the clunky Roman ships, ramming them to splinters. Rome's legions were useless if they couldn't get off their own decks. So, in a stroke of desperate genius, they invented the corvus, which is Latin for crow. It was a massive, 36-foot-long boarding bridge attached to the bow of their ships with a giant, heavy spike on the end. The plan was simple and brutally effective. Sail up next to a Carthaginian ship, drop the bridge, and let the spike smash into their enemy's deck. Voila! Instant boarding ramp. Now the sea battle was a land battle, and on land, nobody beat the legions. The corvus made its grand debut at the Battle of Mylae in 260 BC. The Carthaginian fleet, commanded by Hannibal Gisco, approached the Romans with contempt, expecting another easy victory. Instead, they were shocked as the bridges slammed down, locking the ships together and allowing swarms of Roman legionaries to storm their decks.
It was a stunning victory for Rome, their first major success at sea, and it was all thanks to the bizarre ship-stabbing crow. But the corvus had a fatal flaw. The massive, top-heavy contraption made the Roman ships dangerously unstable. In calm waters, it was a war winner. In a storm, it was a death trap. Rome lost 2 entire fleets, not to the enemy, but to bad weather in 255 and 249 BC, with the loss of over 150,000 men, partly because the corvus made their ships so unseaworthy. By the end of the war, at the decisive Battle of the Aegates Islands in 241 BC, the Romans had abandoned the device. They had finally learned to be competent sailors and built better ships, winning the war through conventional naval skill. Lesson: the Roman corvus is a perfect example of asymmetric innovation. When you can't win by playing your opponent's game, invent a new one. Rome's temporary, flawed, and incredibly dangerous invention completely changed the rules of naval warfare, allowing them to survive long enough to master a skill they didn't have, proving that sometimes a clumsy solution is the bridge you need to get to victory.